Most max stability shoes are pretty boring. They're stable, they're supportive, but let's be honest, they're usually flat, firm, and not much fun to wear. Nike have tried to change that with the Structure Plus. They've taken a max stability shoe and added bouncy, responsive cushioning, and that's something most brands actively avoid. And there's a reason for that. In this video, I'll explain the pros and cons of doing this and how stable this shoe actually is. Does it work better as a lifestyle shoe or as a shoe that you actually want to run in? The big talking point is the midsole. Nike are using ZoomX Superfoam paired with ReactX. That's unusual for a max stability shoe because most brands deliberately keep these shoes firmer and more controlled. Bouncy foam feels great, but it also wants to compress, rebound, and move. And excess movement is the enemy of stability. So what's the benefit of this? You get a much bouncier, comfortable, softer shoe underfoot, especially when you initiate contact with the heel. That's partly got to do with the amount of cushioning underneath your foot. So you have 42 mils in the rear foot, 32 in the forefoot, giving you that 10 mil drop. However, it comes in at a hefty 351 grams for a size 12 US. The ZoomX is the softer super foam and that sits on top, while the ReactX is that more common midsole that we see in the Nike shoes, and that sits throughout the whole shoe on the bottom of the midsole. And instead of a traditional heel clip that we saw in some of the older models of the Nike or that classic arch support, we have the midfoot support system. Now this is similar to what we see in the Structure 26, but it's positioned in a different aspect of the shoe. So you can see we still have that outside stability, lateral stability on the heel, which is excellent for those of you who supinate, who want a support shoe, but we have some inside sidewalls towards the heel rather than the midfoot that we see in the Structure 26. So you can feel that pushing up into your heel a little bit. It's a part of the midsole that just comes up a little bit higher. Focus on keeping your foot centered in the shoe as you move. It also has loads of sole flare, especially on the outer aspect of the forefoot, so a nice wide forefoot to keep your foot centered in the shoe throughout the whole gait cycle. So excellent form of modern stability here. However, there are some downsides to this. If you're someone who needs direct arch support underneath your foot, this isn't for you. If you want a shoe that tilts you out slightly like we see in the New Balance 860, this doesn't have that either. What it has is a more subtle form of support for a max stability shoe. Now often we see with bouncier shoes it makes it a little bit more unstable, especially if the foam is too soft. I think they've got the right balance here, especially for walking and running. You don't sink into it too much and you don't tilt one way or the other too much. They've also changed the geometry of the shoe compared to the Structure 26. So we now have a better heel bevel on the back, so you have a smoother transition when you initiate contact with the ground. Now we found that when you're walking and running, so it's really comfortable when you first hit the ground. Then, like what we saw in the Structure 26, there's some issues with the midfoot, which we'll touch on when we talk about running in this shoe. And then it doesn't have an aggressive forefoot rocker, but it is extremely flexible in the forefoot. So those of you who have issues around the ball of the foot, some sensitivity around the big toe, this is an ideal option. On top of the shoe, they have a new engineered mesh, which is rather thin. It's not as premium as we would expect when you're paying this sort of price point, but it's nice and breathable. It's a normal width in the toe box and it's a true to size and length with a nice padded tongue on top. So it's a bit of a comfort focus for extra padding around the heel cup, and that's probably what adds to the extra weight as well in this shoe. We've got a nice flexible heel counter, so those of you who get sensitivity with Haglund's deformity, this shouldn't be a problem for you. And then of course we've got that 10 mil drop, so it's a perfect option for those of you who have Achilles tendonitis. Not ideal if you stand for long periods of time in this shoe, as it's going to press extra pressure on the forefoot, so those of you with sensitivity there may not enjoy it combined with the extra flexible forefoot. And when we think about where this shoe sits in terms of lifestyle use and running use, well, as a lifestyle shoe, it's incredibly comfortable underfoot. When you initiate contact with the ground, you sink into the shoe, but it's not too soft underfoot, and you push through nicely in the forefoot. So it's an excellent option if you stand all day or you want to use it for walking for long periods of time. It comes in lots of different color options, so it's a perfect lifestyle shoe to wear casually or to use for those longer walks. When it comes to running, well, it's a completely different story. So it's a heavy shoe first of all, so it's not going to be an up-tempo trainer. It's not going to be a trainer that you pick up if you want to do those faster workouts, especially if you need some guidance features. Where it shines, however, is that it's really comfortable underfoot when you initiate contact with the ground. It's a little bit bouncier, a little bit more responsive than some other stability shoes on the market. So if you're comparing it to some other shoes, you might think the Kayano 32. Well, you sink into it, but it's a little bit more springy than the Kayano, but it doesn't have that traditional medial arch support. It's definitely not as soft as what we get in the Gaviota 5, but it's definitely a little bit more bouncier than that. However, where this shoe falls down a little bit for me is that similar to the Structure Structure 26, it's just a little bit flat in the midfoot. So the heel bevel's better, so you initiate contact better with the ground, but when you transition to the midfoot, it's a little bit sloppy, you get a little bit stuck there before you enter the push-off phase of the gait cycle. So they could make a little bit more aggressive of a forefoot rocker in the next model. I think that will make it a really excellent shoe, and if they can pair off some of the weight, well, that could make it one of the best max stability up-tempo shoes on the market. However, it is an improvement on the Structure 26, even though they sit as two separate shoes. It's a little bit bouncier than that, a little bit more aggressive underfoot, but it still has some improvements that it could make overall. So would I buy this shoe? I think I'd pick it up if I just wanted it as a lifestyle shoe for walking around, for easy use, if you want to do some easy miles and have some guidance features underneath it. But I do think there's some better stability shoes in the market that give you that support, but are a little bit more of an up-tempo shoe. However, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think Nike are onto a winner, or do you think it's a flop compared to the Structure 26?